In this video, we are going to wrap it all up like I've been promising for like the last 4 or 5 videos. We're going to build out our project and play it. Let's get started. Let's close everything we don't need at this point in time. And if you've done this series over multiple days, you may have noticed that every time you come back into your project, it takes you back to our default third-person map. That's because it's set to do that. That makes sense. Let's fix that as our first thing, because if we don't, we're going to play the wrong map when we start our game. If we go under the project settings, maps and modes, we were already there earlier to change our default game mode. You may have noticed at the top we have our editor startup map and our game default map. Now these are nice because your editor, for example, can go into your test map, and then when your actual game itself can go into your lobby screen. Let's change both of these to my map. So make sure we start up in our map. Now while we're in here, we're going to change some of the other things for packaging, cooking, and building. If we go into the description at the top, this is where you change the description. You can change your thumbnail, which is what you see when you're on your launcher. Description, project name, versions, things like that. Let's change this to Intro to UE4 as the project name. And the project title will be Intro to UE4. Now the project display title is pretty cool. That's what happens when you run the game in its own window and it displays at the top of the screen. Packaging is another section we should care about. For what we're doing, we're going to run this in the development packaging. That is the ability to test. It gives you your console key and it allows some basic debugging. When you're done, you'd basically want to build in shipping mode. This is going to make it more performant, and you're not going to have the debug console, which you may not want people to have. There's also some other options such as full rebuild, where it rebuilds everything every time just to prevent any possible issues, and things like for distribution, which is for like the App Store. There's other options in here, nativized blueprints and things like that, but we're not going to mess with them. One important one actually is down here for cook-only maps. Cook everything in the project content directory, create compressed cooked packages, do not include editor package, and there's basically a few other things in here. Now if you look here, it says do not include editor content in this package, may cause game to crash if you're using this content. Remember when I mentioned earlier that it's better to pull the stuff out of the starter content and put it in yours as a copy, so if you want to use it and then remove things later? This is an example. If I was to check this and build right now, it would have an issue because our sound, which we used in the editor content, wouldn't play. If we had copied it out and used our copy, then this would be fine, and this would actually save you some space. So these are all ways of optimizing your builds. By default, Unreal is going to try to reference things as best as possible and only include things that it needs to. What I mean by that is, if we go into our materials and we look at any of our materials, let's look at our floor. Right click on it and we go to our reference viewer. We're going to find our reference viewer, and it's going to show us in the middle our item, what is inside of our item, and what may reference that item. So in here, our item references this script, this material, and this texture and texture. And then our map actually references this. If we go into our map itself, you can see everything that the map references. And you can go in and out of things like this. Now the engine is going to do its best job, but it may not be perfect, which is why you have options such as only building certain maps, only building certain asset directories, etc., etc. These are advanced options. We're not going to mess with them. Supported platforms is basically which platforms are you going to support. By default, it's going to support everything. Whether you build to it or not, doesn't really matter. It's just going to support everything. This one's useful because you can go ahead and cut down on your list of platforms, and it may improve your editing times. Target hardware is what we set up in the beginning. These are just some optimization things. If you set it to mobile, for example, and then you restarted it, it's going to make some changes such as turning off some HDR and things like that. Same with your quality settings. These are presets. It's just like when you hit low, medium, or high on a game, it's going to do some automatic presets. You can always change these later, but by default, we're just going to leave these alone. We're going to close this down and we're going to work on building out now. Our project as it is an editor only. We need to cook our content and package our content for use. And that's really simple. If we go down to File, Package Project, any of your supported platforms will show up here, and then you can go ahead and build out. So in my case, I want Windows 64-bit. It's going to ask you to save any open projects, and then ask you where you want to put it. In my case, I'm going to put it on my temp folder. Now, it's going to go ahead and it's going to try to package, and it's going to build out. And it's going to show it in the output log. And that's going to be this giant log here, which I'm actually going to condense down to here. And let's make it big again. If you read through this, if you get bored, why not? You'll notice it's going to find all of your individual things, everything you touched. These are like the walls that I touched, and the doors, and everything I used to build out. Anything in regards to building out starter content, my sounds, my materials. And it's going to go through, like I said, and try to touch only the things that you need. Like here's the water for the lake that I turned over into my own custom content. The ceilings and things like that. It's going to convert things into the appropriate format. That's part of the cooking process. For example, Unreal Engine only accepts waves as an input. However, it'll convert it to an OGG or an MP3 or whatever format's appropriate for the platform, such as Android, iOS, OS X, and things like that. So you only bring it in as one, and then this will separate it out. It's the same thing with converting your textures to the different Android formats, different compression formats for your different shader models for Windows and things like that. So when you're packaging and you're cooking and you're building, it's going to take a while. The first time is going to take the longest. If you look in here, it says it's cooking. Cooking is when it's converting things to the appropriate formats. It'll only cook it once until it changes. And once it changes, it'll go ahead and recook it. So the nice part is it's going to go ahead and cache things as it needs to. Once this is done building, you're going to get a notification, and it's going to say that it's done building, and hopefully you'll have no errors. If you have any errors, you're going to have to read through. We didn't do too much here, and we did test as we were going through, so it should be fine. Once it's done building, we're going to go ahead and open it up, and then we'll go ahead and run through testing it out. Now that the packaging process is complete, and we can see down here that it was build successful, we can go ahead and test this out. Let's go ahead and open up our File Explorer onto our desktop. And we can go ahead and we can look at our project. Now by default, it's going to put it into the Windows No Editor folder. This is something you can rename. This is just the default project because this is a Windows version without the editor. Inside of here, you'll have the engine folder and your game folder along with the file name. Now this file name, for the most part, is going to be the name that you set up for your project. You can rename this. You can rename this to whatever you want, and that would probably be appropriate. Inside of your folders, you have your different files, your packages, and things like that. Your engine content. So these are things that you don't really have to worry about. What we care about is our file. Let's go ahead and run it. Usually the first time when you run it, if you have network access, it's going to ask you about network access. And if you have anything else, it may ask you to run like Smart Screen. But as you notice, here is our game running. Now I can use the console key, as you can see here. But we should get everything running just like we wanted it. It's going to default to full screen, and it's going to try to run borderless windowed. Those are all options. You can go ahead and you can change inside of the editor itself. Those are advanced options. We will not be covering that. But the intent of this was to show you that it's really simple. Now you noticed how long it took the first time for building out to package. Let's package it again. Whoops, let's try packaging again. In the same place. And you'll notice this time when it runs through the packaging process, it should run significantly better. Since it's gone ahead and it's already cooked everything, like I mentioned before, it won't need to recook everything. It's just going to repackage any changes. I'm trying to scroll down and catch up with this thing, but it's going faster than my scrolling. And you'll notice a lot of these things in here that it's already gone ahead and cooked through stuff we don't need to. And there we go. It's finishing up the final, and it's done. That was it. So it took a lot faster. So don't worry about it taking a while for the first time you cook stuff, especially if you're doing another platform like Android, any of the mobile platforms. It's going to take a while. Just bear with it and let it cook things out. Now, one thing that's kind of cool is you can actually cook your content without packaging. If you go to File, Cook Content for Windows, it's going to go ahead and build it out for debugging on the Windows platform. And you can do this like if you want to wander away. Now, in addition to packaging your project, you can also have it automatically zip up the project like it did here, and it's going to build it out and zip it up for distribution. And you have a few other options such as build configurations here, development shipping, packaging settings, which is a shortcut to what we had before. You have launcher settings. You have a ton of other things that you can do in order for your adjustments. Those are all advanced things. They're not really stuff we're going to mess with. That is going to wrap up our packaging video. We were able to successfully take our project, package it up, run it, and then we would be able to distribute to anyone else if we wanted them to play with our project.